Section 32 of John Inglesant, A Romance. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. John Inglesant, A Romance by Joseph Henry Shorthouse. Chapter 21, Part 3. When Inglesant reached Florence, the sun had scarcely risen, and in the miraculously clear and solemn light, the countless pinnacles and marble fronts of the wonderful city rose with sharp colour and outline into the sky. It lay with the country round it, studded with the lines of cypress and encompassed by the massy hills, silent as the grave and lovely as paradise. And ever and anon, as it lay in the morning light, a breeze from the mountains passed over it, rustling against the marble facades and through the belfries of its towers, like the whisper of a god. Now and again, clear and sharp in the liquid air, the musical bells of the campanile rang out the time. The cool expanse of the gardens, the country walk, the pure air, and the silent city seemed to him to chide and reprove the licence and gaiety of the night. Excited by the events of the carnival, his mind and imagination were in that state in which, from the inward fancy, phantoms are projected upon the real stage of life, and playing their fantastic parts, react upon the excited sense, producing conduct which, in turn, is real in its result. As Inglesant entered the city and turned into one of the narrow streets leading up from the Arno, the market people were already entering by the gates and thronging up with their wares to the piazza and the markets. Carpenters were already at work on the scaffolds and other preparations for the concluding festivals of the Carnival. But all these people and all their actions and even the sounds that they produced wore that unreal and unsubstantial aspect which the very early morning light casts upon everything. As Inglesant ascended the narrow street between the white stone houses which set off the brilliant blue above, several porters and country women carrying huge baskets and heaps of country produce ascended with him or passed him as he loitered along, and other more idle and equivocal persons who were just awake looked out upon him from doorways and corners as he passed. He had on a gala dress of silk, somewhat disordered by the night and by his walk, and must have appeared a suitable object for the lawless attempts of the ladroni of a great city, but his appearance was probably not sufficiently helpless to encourage attack. Halfway up the street, at the corner of a house, stood an image of the Virgin, round which the villagers stopped for a moment as much to rest as to pay their devotions. As Inglesant stopped also, he noticed an old man of a wretched and abject demeanour, leaning against the wall of the house, as though scarcely able to stand, and looking eagerly at some of the provisions which were carried past him. True to his custom, Inglesant, when he had given him some small coin as an alms, began to speak to him. "You have carried many such loads as these, father, I doubt not, in your time, though it must be a light one now." "I'm past carrying even myself," said the other in a weak and whining voice, "but I have not carried loads all my life. I have kept a shop on the Goldsmith's Bridge, and have lived at my ease. Now I have nothing left me but the sun and the cool shade." "Yours is a hard fate." "It is a hard and miserable world, and yet I love it. It has done me nothing but evil, and yet I watch it and seek out what it does, and listen to what goes on, just as if I thought to hear of any good fortune likely to come to me. Foolish old man that I am, what is it to me what people say or do, or who dies, or who is married, and why should I come out here to see the market people pass, and climb the street to hear of the murder that was done here last night, and look at the body that lies in the room above?" "What murder?" said Inglesant. "Who was murdered, and by whom? He is a foreigner, they say, an Inglese, a traveller here merely. Who murdered him I know not, though they do say that too." "Where is the body?" said Inglesant. "Let us go up," and he gave the old man another small coin. The old man looked at him for a moment with a peculiar expression. "Better not, signor," he said. "Better go home." "Do not fear for me," said Inglesant. "I bear a charmed life. No steel can touch me, nor any bullet hurt me, till my hour comes, and my hour is not yet." The old man led the way to an open door, carved with tracery and foliaged work, and they ascended a flight of stairs. It was one of those houses so common in Italian towns, whose plain and massive exterior, pierced with few and narrow windows, gives no idea of the size and splendour of the rooms within. When they reached the top of the stairs, Inglesant saw that the house had once, and probably not long before, been the residence of some person of wealth. They passed through several rooms with carved chimney-pieces and cornices, and here and there even some massive piece of furniture still remained. From the windows that opened on the inner side, Inglesant could see the tall cypresses of a garden, and hear the splash of fountains. But the house had fallen from its high estate, and was now evidently used for the vilest purposes. After passing 2 or 3 rooms, they reached an upper hall, or dining-room, of considerable length, and painted in fresco, apparently of some merit. A row of windows on the left opened on the garden, from which the sound of voices and laughter came up. The room was bare of furniture, except towards the upper end, where was a small and shattered table, upon which the body of the murdered man was laid. Inglesant went up and stood by its side. There was no doubt whose countryman he had been. The fair English boy, scarcely bordering upon manhood, the heir probably of bright hopes, travelling with a careless or incompetent tutor, lay upon the small table, his long hair glistening in the sunlight, his face peaceful and smiling as in sleep. The fatal rapier thrust, marked by the stain upon the clothes, was the sole sign that his mother, waking up probably at that moment in distant England, with his image in her heart, was bereaved for ever of her boy. Inglesant stood silent a few moments, looking sadly down. That other terrible figure upon the white hearthstone was so constantly in his mind that this one so like it scarcely could be said to recall the image of his murdered brother. But the whole scene certainly strengthened his morbid fancy, and it seemed to him that he was on the footsteps of the murderer, and that his fate was drawing near. "His steps are still in blood," he said aloud, "and it is warm. He cannot be far off." He turned as he spoke to look for the old man, but he was gone, and in his place a ghastly figure met Inglesant's glance. Standing about 3 feet from the table, a little behind Inglesant, and also looking fixedly at the murdered boy, was the figure of a corpse. The face was thin and fearfully white, and the whole figure was wrapped and swathed in grave clothes, somewhat disordered and loosened, so as to give play to the limbs. This form took no notice of the other's presence, but continued to gaze at the body with its pallid, ghastly face. Inglesant scarcely started. Nothing could seem more strange and unreal to him than what was passing on every side. That the dead should return and stand by him seemed to him not more fearful and unreal than all the rest. Suddenly the corpse turned its eyes upon Inglesant, and regarded him with a fixed and piercing glance. "You spoke of the author of this deed as though you knew him," it said. "I'm on the track of a murderer, and my fate is urging me on. It seems to me that I see his bloody steps." "This was no murder," said the corpse in an irritated and impatient voice. "It was a chance melee, and an unfortunate and unhappy thrust. We do not even know the name of the man who lies there. Are you the avenger of blood, that you see murder at every step?" "I am in truth the avenger of blood," said Inglesant in a low and melancholy voice. "Would I were not." The corpse continued to look at Inglesant fixedly, and would have spoken, but the voices which had been heard in the garden now seemed to come nearer, and hurried steps approached the room. The laughter that Inglesant had heard was stilled, and deep and solemn voices strove together, and one above the rest said, "Bring up the murderer." The corpse turned round impatiently, and the next moment, from a small door which opened on a covered balcony and outside staircase to the garden, there came hurriedly in a troop of the most strange and fantastic figures that the eye could rest upon. Angels and demons and savage men in lions' skins, and men with the heads of beasts and birds, swarmed tumultuously in, dragging with them an unfortunate being in his night clothes, and apparently just out of bed, whom they urged on with blows. This man, who was only half awake, was evidently in the extremity of terror, and looked upon himself as already in the place of eternal torment. He addressed now one and now another of his tormentors, as well as he could find breath, in the most abject terms, endeavouring in the most ludicrous manner to choose the titles and epithets to address them most in accordance with the individual appearance that the spectre he entreated wore to his dazzled eyes, whether a demon or an angel, a savage or a man-beast. When he saw the murdered man and the terrible figure that stood by Inglesant, he nearly fainted with terror, but on many voices demanding loudly that he should be brought in contact with the body of his victim, he recovered a little, and recognizing in Inglesant at least a being of an earthly sphere, and by his dress a man of rank, he burst from his tormentors, and throwing himself at his feet, he entreated his protection, assuring him that he had been guilty of no murder, having just been dragged from a sound sleep, and being even ignorant that a murder had been committed. Inglesant took little notice of him, but the corpse interposed between the man and the fantastic crew. It was still apparently in a very bad humour, especially with Inglesant, and said imperiously, "We have enough and too much of this foolery. Have not some of you done enough mischief for one night? This gentleman says he is on the track of a murderer, and will have it that he sees his traces in this unfortunate affair." At these words the maskers crowded round Inglesant with wild and threatening gestures, apparently half earnest and half the result of wine, and as many of them were armed with great clubs, the consequences might have seemed doubtful to one whose feelings were less excited than Inglesant's were. He, however, as though proceeding were a matter of course, merely took off his hat and addressed the others in explanation. "I am indeed in pursuit of a murderer, the murderer of my brother, a gallant and noble gentleman who was slain foully in cold blood. The murderer was an Italian, his name Malvolti. Do any of you, signori, happen to have heard of such a man?" There was a pause after this singular address, but the next moment a demon of terrified aspect forced his way to the front, saying in a tone of drunken consequence, "I knew him formerly at Lucca. He was well born, and my friend." "He was and is a skelerat and a coward," said Inglesant fiercely. "It would be well to be more careful of your company, sir." "Have I not said he was my friend, sir?" cried the demon, furious with passion. "Who will lend me a rapier?" A silent and melancholy person, with the head of an owl, who had several under his arm, immediately tendered him one with a low bow, and the maskers fell back in a circle, while the demon, drawing his weapon, threw himself into an attitude and attacked Inglesant, who, after looking at him for a moment, also drew his rapier and stood upon his guard. It soon appeared that the demon was a very moderate fencer. In less than a minute his guard was entered by Inglesant's irresistible tierce, and he would have been infallibly run through the body had he not saved himself by rolling ignominiously on the ground. This incident appeared to restore the corpse to good humour. It laughed, and turning to the maskers said, "Gentlemen, let me beg of you to disperse as quickly as possible before the day is any farther advanced. You know of the rendezvous at 1 o'clock. I will see the authorities as to this unhappy affair. Sir," he continued, turning to Inglesant, "you are, I believe, the friend of Don Agostino di Chigi, whom he has been introducing into Florentine society. If it will amuse you to see a frolic of the carnival carried out, of which this is only the somewhat unfortunate rehearsal, and will meet me this afternoon at 2 o'clock at the great church in the Via Larga, I shall be happy to do my best to entertain you. A simple domino will suffice. I am the Count Capici." Inglesant gave his name in return. He apologized for not accepting the Count's courtesy on the plea of ill health, but assured him he would take advantage of his offer to cultivate his acquaintance. They left the house together, the Count covering himself with a cloak, and Inglesant accompanied him to the office of police, from whence he went to his lodging and to his bed. He arose early in the afternoon, and remembering the invitation he had received, he went out into the Via Larga. The streets formed a strange contrast to the stillness and calm of the cool morning. The afternoon was hot, and the city crowded with people of every class and rank. The balconies and windows of the principal streets were full of ladies and children. Trophies and embroideries hung from the houses and crossed the street. Strings of carriages and country carts dressed with flowers and branches of trees paraded the streets. Every variety of fantastic and grotesque costume and every shade of colour filled and confused the eye. Music, laughter, and loud talking filled the ear. Inglesant, from his simple costume and grave demeanour, became the butt of several noisy parties, but used as he was to great crowds and to the confused revelries of courts, he was able to disentangle himself with mutual good humour. He recognized his friends of the morning, who were performing a kind of comedy on a country cart arched with boughs, in imitation of the oldest form of the itinerant theatre. He was recognized by them also, for in a pause of the performance, as he was moving down a by-street, he was accosted by one of the company, enveloped in a large cloak. He had no difficulty in recognizing beneath this concealment his antagonist of the morning, who still supported his character of demon. "I offer you my apologies for the occurrences of this morning, Signor," he said, "having been informed by my friends more closely concerning them than I can myself recollect. I am also deeply interested in the person of whom you spoke, who formerly was a friend of mine, and I must also have been acquainted with the Signore, your brother, of which I am the more certain, as your appearance every moment recalls him more and more to my mind. I should esteem it a great favour to be allowed to speak at large with you on these matters. If you will allow me to pay my respects at your lodgings, I will conduct you to my father's house, Il Conte Pericon di Visalvo, where I can show you many things which may be of interest to you respecting the man whom I understand you seek." Inglesant replied that he should gladly avail himself of his society, and offered to come to the Count's house early the next day. He found the house a sombre, plain one, in a quiet street, with a tall front pierced with a few windows. At the low door hung a wine flask, as a sign that wine was sold within, for the sale of wine by retail was confined to the gentry, the common people being only allowed to sell wholesale. The Count was the fortunate possessor of a very fine vineyard, which made his wine much in request, and Inglesant found the whole ground floor of his house devoted to this retail traffic. Having inquired for the Count, he was led up the staircase into a vestibule, and from thence into the Count's own room. This was a large apartment with windows looking on to the court, with a suite of rooms opening beyond it. It was handsomely furnished, with several cages full of singing birds in the windows. Outside, the walls of the houses forming the courtyard were covered with vines and creeping jessamine and other plants, and a fountain splashed in the centre of the court, which was covered with a coloured awning. The old Count received Inglesant politely. He was a tall, spare old man, with a reserved and dignified manner, more like that of a Spaniard than of an Italian. Rather to Inglesant's surprise, he introduced him to his daughter, on whom, as she sat near one of the windows, Inglesant's eyes had been fixed from the moment he had entered the room. The Italians were so careful of the ladies of their families, and it was so unusual to allow strangers to see them, that his surprise was not unnatural, especially as the young lady before him was remarkably beautiful. She was apparently very young, tall, and dark-eyed, with a haughty and indifferent manner which concentrated itself entirely upon her father. The Count noticed Inglesant's surprise at the cordiality of his reception, and seemed to speak as if in explanation. "You are no stranger to us, Signore," he said. "My son has not only commended you to me, but your intimacy with Count Agostino has endeared you already to us who admire and love him." As Agostino had told him the evening before that he knew little of these people, though he believed the old Count to be respectable, this rather increased Inglesant's surprise, but he merely said that he was fortunate in possessing a friend whose favour procured him such advantages. "My son's affairs," continued the old man, "unavoidably took him abroad this morning, but I wait his return every moment." Inglesant suspected that the cavaliere, who appeared to him to be a complete debauchee, had not been at home at all that night, but if that were the case, when he entered the room a few moments afterwards, his manner was completely self-possessed and quiet, and showed no signs of a night of revelry. As soon as they were seated, the cavaliere began to explain to Inglesant that both his father and himself were anxious to see him, to confer respecting the unfortunate circumstances which, as they imagined, had brought him to Italy upon a mission which they assured him was madly imprudent. Our nation, signore, said the cavaliere, is notorious for two passions, jealousy and revenge. Both of these, combined with self-interest, induced Malvolti to commit the foul deed which he perpetrated upon your brother. While in Italy, your brother crossed him in some of his amours, and also resented some indiscretions which the manners of our nation regard with tolerance, but which your discreeter countrymen resent with unappeasable disgust. Our people never forgive injuries, nay, they entail them on their posterity. We ourselves left our native city, Lucca, on account of one of these feuds, which made it unsafe for us to remain. And I could show you a gentleman's house in Lucca, whose master has never set foot out of doors for 9 years, nay, scarcely looked out of window for fear of being shot by an antagonist who has several times planted ambushes to take away his life. It is considered a disgrace to a family that one of its members has forgiven an injury, and a mother will keep the bloody clothes of her murdered husband to incite her young sons to acts of vengeance. You will see, signore, the evil which such ideas as these wind about our lives, and how unwise it must be in a stranger to involve himself needlessly in such an intrigue in a foreign country, unknown and comparatively without friends. Italy swarms with bravos hired to do the work of vengeance. Merchants are assaulted in their warehouses in open day. In the public streets the highest personages in the land are not safe. What will be the fate, then, of a stranger whose death is necessary to the safety of an Italian? I understand you, signore, said Inglesant, and I thank you for your good will, but you are somewhat mistaken. I am not seeking the man of whom we speak, though I confess I came to Italy partly with the expectation of meeting him, when it is the will of God, or the will of the devil, whom he permits to influence the affairs of men, that this man and I should meet. I shall not attempt to avoid the interview. It would be useless if I did. The result of that meeting, who can tell? But as I said yesterday to the Count Capici, till my hour comes I bear a charmed life that cannot be taken, and any result I regard with supreme indifference, if so be I may by any means escape in the end the snares of the devil, who seeks to take me captive at his will. The two gentlemen regarded Inglesant with profound astonishment as he uttered these words, and the young lady in the window raised her eyes towards him as he was speaking. He spoke very pure Italian, with some appearance of interest. After a pause, Inglesant went on. I also venture to think, signore, he said, that you are unaware of the position of this man and of the condition to which his crimes have brought him. I am well informed from sure sources that he is without friends, and that his crimes have raised him more enemies in this country even than elsewhere, so that he is afraid to appear openly lest he fall a victim to his own countrymen. He is also in abject poverty, and is therefore to a great extent powerless to do evil. The cavaliere smiled. You do not altogether know this country, signore, he said. There are always so many different factions and interests at work that a daring, useful man is never without patrons who will support and further his private interests in return for the service he may render them. And though you may not be fully aware of it, it is because it is notorious that you are yourself supported and protected by a most powerful and widely spread faction, that your position in this country is as assured and safe as it is. His words certainly struck Inglesant. The idea that he was already a known and marked man in this wonderful country, and playing an acknowledged part in its fantastic drama, was new to him, and he remained silent. From all ordinary antagonists, continued the cavaliere, this knowledge is sufficient to secure you. No man would wish, unless ruined and desperate, to draw on his head the swift and certain punishment which a hand raised against your life would be sure to invoke. But a reckless, despairing man stops at nothing, and should you, by your presence even, endanger this man's standing in the favour of some new-found patron, or impede the success of some freshly planned scheme, perhaps the last hope of his ruined life, I would not buy your safety at an hour's rate. While the cavaliere was speaking, it was evident that his sister was listening with great attention. The interest that she manifested and the singular attraction that Inglesant felt towards her so occupied his thoughts that he could scarcely attend to what the other was saying, though he continued speaking for some time. It is possible that the cavaliere noticed this, for Inglesant was suddenly conscious that he was regarding him fixedly and with a peculiar expression. He apologized for his inattention on the ground of ill health, and soon after took his leave, having invited the cavaliere to visit him at his lodgings. As Inglesant walked back through the streets of the city, he was perplexed at his own sensations, which appeared to so different from any he had previously known. The attraction he experienced towards the lady he had just seen was quite different from the affection he had felt for Mary Collett. That was a sentiment which commended itself to his reason and his highest feelings. In her company he felt himself soothed, elevated above himself, safe from danger and from temptation. In this latter attraction he was conscious of a half-formed fear, and of a sense of glamour and peril, and of an alluring force independent of his own free will. The opinion he had formed of her brother's character may have had something to do with these feelings, and the sense of perpetual danger and insecurity with which he walked this land of mystery and intrigue no doubt increased it. He half resolved not to visit the old nobleman again, but even while forming the resolution he knew that he should break it. The circumstances in which he was placed indeed almost precluded such a course. The very remarkable beauty of the young lady, and the extraordinary unreserve with which he had been introduced to her, unreserve so unusual in Italy, while it might increase the misgiving he felt, made it very difficult for him to decline the acquaintance. The girl's beauty was of a kind unusual in Italy, though not unknown there, her hair being of a light brown, contrasting with her magnificent eyes, which were of the true Italian splendour and brilliancy. She had doubtless been kept in the strictest seclusion, and Inglesant could only wonder what could have induced the old Count to depart from his usual caution. End of section 32.